Welcome, everyone. So, today's live stream is going to be about YAKUB, the father of the white race. And this is a comic book that was written by a man named Frank Edward. This, however, is the book that it was based on, Message to a Black Man in America by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. This informs this. So, we're going to explain the origin of white people according to the Nation of Islam. And so if you have you might find this thing entertaining. You might find it disgusting. You might find it sad. There's a lot of different things you might find about it. This is the origin of white people according to the Nation of Islam. And the origin of white people and the very nature of white people. So let's get into it because it ought to be interesting. For starters, let's talk a little bit about the Nation of Islam. Now, everybody knows that the Nation of Islam exists today as an organization within the Black community that is most known for being Black Muslims. It was the former religion of Muhammad Ali, other very prominent Black athletes, and others have joined the Nation of Islam or found their way under the sway of the Nation of Islam. So the Nation of Islam was actually founded by a man named W.D. Fard, or W.D. Fard Muhammad. He was the originator of the Nation of Islam here in Detroit. Now, there's some belief that W.D. Fard Muhammad actually was a member of what they call the Moorish Science Temple. So there was a guy named Noble Drew Ali. He founded what was called the Moorish Science Temple back in the early 20s or the late 1900s, or maybe the early 1900s. And I think it was Chicago. And there is some belief that W.D. Fard Muhammad was a member of that organization, which is also a cult. And he came to Detroit and founded the Nation of Islam. And his first student was this man, Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad carried on as the messenger of Allah. Allah is W.D. Fard Muhammad. So one of the first things you need to know about the Nation of Islam is that they worship a man. The man's name is W.D. Fard Muhammad. They believe he is Allah, God in the flesh. All right, that is in this book. So before we get to YAKUB, that is in this book. So if you are an individual who wants to know whether the Nation of Islam are real Muslims, they are not. They are essentially racists, race realists. And I don't have a problem with the Nation of Islam, really. I'm Black enough to not have an issue with them. But I don't at all believe their beliefs. They do adopt some of the Islamic things like the moon and the star. They do read the Quran. They do read the Bible. And they do have some good ideas. The Nation of Islam does not promote communism. They promote segregation, but primarily they push for independence from whites and independence from white society. And because they believe whites are the devil, and that's why that brings us to this fellow here, YAKUB, the father of the white race. So because the Nation of Islam believes that white people are the devil, they don't believe that you should integrate with the devil. This is how the Nation of Islam and the Ku Klux Klan can work together. They've had meetings where they talked about how better to serve, how better to keep the their individual constituencies, but how to best keep the constituencies apart. Um, the anti-integration element of the Nation of Islam is pretty obvious in terms of they believe the white people are the devil. Now they don't think that much. They don't think highly of all the other peoples, but they don't really consider what they say about white people to be hatred. They consider it just to be the nature of white people, as if they were talking about any other kind of animal. So the idea that they are racist, they don't view it that way. They view as that their view of white people is the nature of whites and nature of white society and the nature of white culture, etc. So they don't necessarily view it as a racist thing. So according to the Nation of Islam, again in this book, Message to a Black Man, Message to the Black Man, blacks are the original inhabitants of Earth. This is something that, many offshoots of the Nation of Islam believe. This is an interesting piece of business. So for those of you who are going to have some trouble following up, the Moorish Science Temple came first, run by Noble Drew Ali. W.D. Fard Muhammad was a member of that organization, allegedly. He then came to Detroit and founded the Nation of Islam. There was a guy in New York who named Clarence 13X. I forget what his real name is. But he founded what's called the Nation of Gods and Earths. That is that's an offshoot of the Nation of Islam. So the Wu-Tang Clan and all the crazy stuff that they talk about comes from the Nation of Gods and Earths, which is a offshoot of the Nation of Islam, which is an offshoot of the Moorish Science Temple. Okay? So then, of course, there are offshoots to the Nation of Gods and Earths, but let's not get too deep into that, right? This stuff, it just goes on forever. But the idea that blacks are the original human beings on Earth is central to the origin of whites. Let's go into this book. I think I took notes. It's page 100, if I remember correctly. Here's 103. It says the making of the devil. So, same people that ask about the day's mathematics. Yes, that's the Nation of Gods and Earths. They believe in the supreme alphabet and the supreme mathematics. Supreme mathematics goes from I think it's 0 to 9, or is it 0 to 10? It's 1 to 0. So it's like all of them have different meanings. I'm on the spot now. I used to know this stuff. I was, one of my OGs was a member of the Nation of Gods and Earths. He used to beat this shit into our heads. But basically, 0 means cipher. It means the 360 degree plane. So from beginning to end. I think 1 is wisdom, 2 is understanding, 3 is, I don't know, but 4 is culture. I don't remember. But all of them basically, so basically you'll know, like they'll ask you like what the math is. Basically, that's basically like what time it is, what hour it is, what the date is, and you'll do the math from there. So if it's like 3 o'clock, what is 3? 3 is, whatever that means. So that would be the math for the day. Or sometimes they'll break it down like, it's today is September the 15th. So they might be like, September is 9, the 9th month was the 9th number on the supreme mathematics. And since there's no 15, it'd be like 1 plus 5, which is 6. And 6 is whatever number on the supreme mathematics. So that's how it would go. But YAKUB, Message to the Black Man, what was this, page 100? But it was really 103, if I remember correctly. And it says, the devil's fool and disgrace you. So we're going to go into this a little bit. It says the making of the devil. Read a little bit of the making of the devil. Wait a minute. So what's page 53? Let's check. I put page 53 down, but I don't remember what's on page 53. Page 53. Ah, yes, this is the origin of man. Who is the original man? I knew this. I wrote it down for a reason. So since you won't be able to read it because due to my blurry screen, I will read it for you. It says, the time has arrived when it must be told the world over. There are millions who do not know who is the original man. Why should this question be put before the world today? Because it is time of judgment between the black and white and the knowledge of the rightful owners of the earth. Allah is now pointing out to the nations of the earth their rightful places, and this judgment will bring an end to war over it. Now it is easy to recognize the original man, the real owner of the earth, by the history of the two, black and white. We have an unending past history of the black nation and a limited one of the white race. We find that the history teaches that the earth was populated by the black nation ever since it was created. But the history of the white race does not take us beyond 6,000 years. Everywhere the white race has gone on our planet, they have either found the original man or a sign that he had been there previously. Allah is proving to the world of black men that the white race actually does not own any part of our planet. Now, this should be an important piece of element here for people who are, if you dabble in Hotepness or the Nation of Gods and Earths or Black Hebrews or anything like that. It says here, everywhere the white race has gone on our planet, they have either found the original man or a sign that he had been there previously. So there's a book called They Came Before Columbus. That is a very famous book. People like Hotep Jesus believes it. People like Mosh Torre, they believe it. And They Came Before Columbus basically says that there are Africans in America before the whites came. And so that they are the original inhabitants of the United States. Again, if blacks are the original man, then we were everywhere first. They don't necessarily mean that they're Muslims or that they belong to the Nation of Islam. It just means that that's what they believe. Okay. But these are all just pieces of the same tree. All right. So people who read books like They Came Before Columbus and thinks that Africans were already here because, well, the Aztecs made some kind of statue with fat lips. So all of a sudden that means that they met Africans, which that is not what that means, but okay. It doesn't bother me anyway. You know, again, I'm black enough that if the Africans were here first, well, that's great. But if they weren't, it doesn't really bother anybody because all those people are dead. So it don't matter, right? So I'm not here to do a blood and soil argument over blacks and whites. All right. So it doesn't matter. So that was page 53. Tells you that the black man was here first. The black man is the original ruler of planet Earth. So how is it that the black man can rule the earth and yet all Africa, Haiti, which is back in the news, Jamaica, various black countries and societies are not doing so well? How could that be? Well, it's obviously white trickery. It's obviously the white devil has done something to either poison the mind or to poison the politic or the social body of the black nation. They're an invasion, an invading force. They're a cancer. They don't use those words. But in the making of the devil, as they explain to you how white people are created, you'd get no other answer than to believe that white people are an invading species, hell bent on the destruction of everything holy. So the full story is not even on page 103. It's actually later in the book. See, he gives you this stuff in dribs and drabs, Mr. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I believe the real story is 110 to 111. As you know, you start really reading it and getting into it. this is the story of YAKUB, the entire story of YAKUB. So I need to go before that. So I got to, because there are other things that need to be explained before I get into the origin of YAKUB. There are other things that need to be explained first. All right. So they tried to explain why there are other people on the planet outside of whites and blacks, right? So page 106, Elijah Muhammad is going to explain that his quote, the black man produces these four colors, brown, red, yellow, and white. The original people, whom the white race found here, red people, were the brothers of the black man. They are referred to as the Red Indians. The Indian part of the name must refer to the name of the country which they came, India. The all-wise Allah said that they came here 16,000 years ago, and they were exiled from India for breaking the law of Islam. Now, we know that this is incorrect because the Native Americans are not Indians. They're just called Indians because Christopher Columbus was trying to find India when he found North America. So the name Indian just stuck, but they're not Indians. You would think God would know that, but God didn't know that apparently. So that explains the red man. They don't do too much explaining of the yellows and the browns. They just came to be. We'll go through that as far as we go through this. So on page 107, it says, today the white race, the blacks' worst enemies, has planned to make a last try to destroy the black man by pretending to be their friends and allow intermarriage. So there that is. Yeah. Look at the big brain on YAKUB. So this thing, it gets a little nutty in here. I say this all the time when you read these books written by super pro black hoteps and people like this. It gets kind of nutty. They just start throwing random numbers around. So it says here, page 108. We make such history once every 25,000 years. He's talking about the black man. When such history is written, it is done by 24 of our scientists. One acts as judge or God for the others, and 23 actually do the work of getting up the future of the nation. And all is put into one book, and at intervals where such and such part or portion will come to pass, that people will be given that part of the book through one among that people from one of the 12 major scientists, as it is then called a scripture, which actually means script or writing from which original or book. Okay. There is a significance to the number 24 scientists and the 25,000 years. The number 24 scientists used is in accordance with the hours of the day and the measurement of the circumference of our planet around the equator and in the region of our poles, Arctic and Antarctic oceans. And then they started breaking down some crazy numbers here. It's kind of crazy, right? So it's important to know that there are 24 scientists because YAKUB, the father of the white race, he is one of the 24 scientists. That is important to know. So white people are the makers of mischief. Now they talk about the creation of the sun and the moon and all that kind of stuff. I didn't take a note on that. I probably should have, because the origin story that leads us to the creation of white people is a necessity that we know that, but if I remember correctly, and I don't want to lie on this guy, but I'm pretty sure he's making the argument that human beings, blacks, are from some other planet, and that we found ourselves on Earth after colliding with some other planet. Let me let me make sure that that's correct first. But I know we didn't come out of the ground. I know I can tell you that. We came from some other world. But that would be on a different page. And I didn't take notes on that. As you can see, I flipped through these books. I do not go through these books and highlight things. I typically don't highlight things. I like to keep my books pretty clean, so I don't bend pages too much. So this is probably the most bending of pages I've done in this book. But most books that I have that are brand new, that are not used, I don't really bend them up too much. But we'll get to. I guess we'll do another one on how human beings came to be on this world. I mean, whatever. That part is not necessary, really. Just know that the black man is the original man on this planet. That's the important bit. All right. So now we get into the origin of the devil himself. This is an important piece. This is a very important piece. What page is that on? Let's see, is it 106? No, it's not on 106. What page? I think it's 110, yeah. All right, here it is on page 110. Our 66 trillion years from the moon has proven a great and wise show of the original power to build wonders in the heavens and earth. 6,000 years ago, or to be exact, 66,000 years ago, or 6,600 years ago, as Allah taught me, our nation gave birth to another God whose name was YAKUB. He started studying the life germ of man to try and make a new creation, a new man, whom our 24 scientists had foretold 8,400 years before the birth of Mr. YAKUB. And the scientists were aware of his birth and work before he was born, as they are today of the intentions or ideas of the present world. So the coming of YAKUB was known to the scientists years before he was actually born, and yet they allowed YAKUB to do what he does. According to the word of Allah, to me, quote, Mr. YAKUB was seen by the 23 scientists of the Black Nation over 15,000 years ago. They predicted that in the year 8,400, this man YAKUB will be born 20 miles from the present holy city Mecca of Arabia, and that at that time of his birth, the satisfaction and dissatisfaction of the people would be 70% satisfied and 30% dissatisfied. And that when this man is born, he will change civilization and produce a new race of people who would rule the original Black nation for 6,000 years. After that time, the original Black nation would give birth to one whose wisdom, knowledge, and power would be infinite, one whom the world would recognize as being the greatest and mightiest God since the creation of the universe, and that he would destroy YAKUB's world and restore the original nation, or ancient nation, into power to rule forever. Pause right here. Now, one of the things that you hear a lot in the pro-black circles as the Black Messiah, right? They made a movie what was called Judas and the Black Messiah, and the Black Messiah was Fred Hampton, right? Some 20-year-old armed robber from Chicago who just happened to be a leader of the Black Panther Party in Chicago, right? All of a sudden, he was a messiah. The idea that COINTELPRO was involved with these black organizations trying to prevent the rise of a black messiah, even though Martin Luther King already existed and he pretty much assumed the mantle of black messiah. So this also believes that there is the coming of a black messiah, but they believe that the black messiah has already come, because that would be W.D. Fard, who is Allah, who is God in the flesh. So they believe that the black messiah is already here, while your government and your social media and everybody are trying to come up with some kind of black messiah. It says, the mighty one is known under many names. He has no equal. There never was one like him. He is referred to in the Bible as God Almighty, and in some places as Jehovah, the God of God, the Lord of Lords. The Holy Quran refers to him as Allah, the one God. Beside him there is no God. There is none like him. The supreme being, the mighty, the wise, the best knower, the light giver, the life giver, the Mahdi. He is also referred to as the Christ, the second Jesus, the Son of Man, who is wise and is all powerful. He knows how to reproduce the universe and the people of his choice. He will remove and destroy the present, old, warring, wicked world of YAKUB and set up a world of peace and righteousness out of the present so-called Negroes who are rejected and despised by this world. Again, the rise of the black messiah who's going to overthrow white people. Okay. Denmark Vesey was probably seen as that kind of black messiah. Toussaint Louverture, the leader of the Haitian Revolution, might be seen as a black messiah. Haile Selassie, or Haile Selassie I, or Haile Selassie I, the former king of Ethiopia, could be seen as a black messiah. He's worshipped by the Rastafarians. They also worship a man. And they worship Haile Selassie because he fought back against the Italians when they invaded Ethiopia. Okay, so the idea that there is going to be a black messiah, somebody to return you to the throne where you deserve to be because you're the original man on earth and all this kind of stuff, right? So back to the story of YAKUB. Mr. YAKUB is still on page 111. Mr. YAKUB was naturally born under 30% dissatisfied. So out of the 30% of people who were dissatisfied with Mecca, YAKUB was born of those. Whenever there is a longing or demand for a change, nature will produce that man who will bring it about. Allah taught me that the present percentage of dissatisfaction is 98%, near 100%, with the present ruling powers. This 100% dissatisfied will bring about a 100% change. YAKUB did not bring about a 100% change, but a near 90% change. So this is all very confusing, right? But he's telling you that in present time, that means when this book was written and produced, which I probably should have gave you the year that it was produced, but I'll do that later. But at the time, and they're just making up figures here. They have no, they didn't ask, they didn't do a poll to see how many black people were dissatisfied. But it's probably in the 60s. So yeah, probably a lot of people, or the 50s or the 60s or whatever. So there's probably a lot of people dissatisfied. Okay. So not going to go into too much wrong with that. So he says, YAKUB noticed the magnetic power in the steel attracting the other. He looked up at his uncle and said, "Uncle, when I get to be an old man, I am going to make a people who shall rule you." The uncle said, "What will you make? Something to make mischief and cause bloodshed in the land?" YAKUB said, "Nevertheless, uncle, I know that which you do not know." So this is young YAKUB telling his uncle he's going to create something that's going to rule the black man. It says, and it was at this moment that the boy YAKUB first came into the knowledge of just who he was, born to make trouble, break peace, kill, and destroy his own people, and with a made enemy to the black nation. And he starts talking about the nature of steel and how the white man loves steel and all this kind of stuff. And it says YAKUB was the founder of unlike attracts and like repels. Again, this is the magnetic forces, right? Though Mr. YAKUB was a member of the black nation, he began school at the age of 4. He had an unusual sized head. When he had grown up, the others referred to him as the big head scientist. At the age of 18, he had finished with all of his colleges and universities of the nation and was seen preaching on the streets of Mecca, making converts. He made such impressions on the people that many began following him. He learned from studying the germ of the black man under the microscope, because there were microscopes then, that there were 2 people in him, and that one was black and the other was brown. So there's 2 people inside of YAKUB. That's probably why his head is twice the size of everybody else's. He said if he could successfully separate the one from the other, he could graft the brown germ into its last stage, which would be white. With his wisdom, he could make the white, which he discovered was the weaker of the black germ. So YAKUB is on the streets of Mecca preaching, and he's getting converts. People are following him. And it says, quote, this is page 113, as he made converts in and around the city of Mecca, persecution set in. The authorities became afraid of such powerful teachings, with promises of luxury and making slaves of others. As they began making arrests of those who believed the teaching, the officers would go back and find, to their surprise, others still teaching and believing it. Finally, they arrested Mr. YAKUB, but it only increased the teachings. They kept persecuting and arresting YAKUB's followers until they filled all the jails. So, this is typical of street proselytizing, right? You proselytize in the streets, and things get a little ruckus. You get arrested. You hear about this when you think about like Jesus in Rome, right? He's in the caves, making trouble. He gets arrested. You know what I'm saying? So, okay. It says the officers finally reported to the king that there was no more room to put a prisoner in. All the jails are filled. And when we go out into the streets, we find them still teaching. What shall we do with them? The king questioned the officers on what the teachings were and of the name of the leader. The officers gave the king the answers to everything. The king said, this is not the name of that man. On entering the prison, the king was shown YAKUB's cell. Assalamu alaikum, the king said. So you are Mr. YAKUB? He said, yes, I am. The king said, YAKUB, I have come to see if we could work out some agreement that would bring about an end to this trouble. What would you suggest? Mr. YAKUB told the king, if you would give me and my followers everything to start a civilization as you have, and furnish us with money and other necessities of life for 20 years, I will take my followers and we will go from you. The king was pleased with this suggestion or condition made by YAKUB and agreed to take care of them for 20 years until YAKUB's followers were able to take care of themselves. After learning who Mr. YAKUB was, they were all afraid of him and were glad to make almost any agreement with him and his followers. All right, so they're giving YAKUB all he needs to form a civilization. He held up the king of Mecca and says, the king of Mecca said, be away from me, big-brained idiot. What are you doing out here in our streets making all this trouble? Get away from us, right? Beat it. So it says, after rounding them all up into ships, they numbered 59,999. YAKUB made 60,000. That means ships, I guess. Their ships sailed out to the isle of the Arabian Sea called Pelan, or in the Bible it's called Patmos. After they were loading into the ships, Mr. YAKUB examined each of them to see if they were 100% with him, and to see if they were all healthy and productive people. If not, he would throw them off. Some would found to be unfit, and overboard they went. So YAKUB he's getting rid of people that he can't trust. People who are not with him 100%. This is a cult now, brother. They're doing purges. They're doing purges on the boats, brother. When they arrived on the isle, Mr. YAKUB said to them, see how they, the holy people, have cast us out? Now, if you would choose me to be your king, I will teach you how to go back and rule them all. So he's got all these followers, and it's almost like Jim Jones on, at this point, they're on this island. He says, I should be your king. I will teach you what you need to go back and rule them. And they obviously chose YAKUB to be the king, right? Okay. Of course, they had already chosen YAKUB to be their king. So YAKUB chose doctors, ministers, nurses, and a cremator for his top laborers. He called these laborers together and told them his plan for making a new people who would rule for 6,000 years. He goes to the doctor first and says, Doctor, let all the people come to you who want to marry. And if there come to you 2 real black ones, take a needle and get a little of their blood and go into your room and pretend to be examining it to see whether their blood would mix. Then come and tell them that they will have to find another mate because their blood would not mix. And then it says here, it was the aim of YAKUB to get rid of the black, and he did. Give them a certificate, YAKUB said, to take to the minister, warning the minister against marrying the couple because their bloods does not mix. When that comes to you, 2 browner ones, take a pretended blood sample of them, but give them a certificate saying that they are eligible to marry. So YAKUB don't want black people marrying. No marrying for you. No pussy for you, black man. Mr. YAKUB charge to his laborers was very strict. Death if disobeyed. They didn't know what Mr. YAKUB had in mind until they were given the labor to do. He made his laborers, from the chief to the least, liars. The doctor lied about the blood of the 2 black people who wanted to marry, that it did not mix. The brown and the black could not be married, brown only. The doctors of today hold the same position over people. You go to them to get a blood test to see if you are fit to be married. Today they say it's done to see if there are any contagious germs in the blood. I wish they would enforce such a law today to keep the white from mixing with the black. Just the opposite. Perhaps we could remain black and not be disgraced by a mixture of all colors. So Elijah Muhammad is talking about mixed people as being a disgrace. Now look at the face of Elijah Muhammad. Dun, dun, dun. A lot of these Negroes seem to be mixed, right? Elijah Muhammad, I think he was probably this is pretty crazy, right? So in the days of YAKUB's grafting of the present race, white race, I'm sorry, a new and unlike race among the black nation for 600 years, his law was that they would not allow the birth of a black baby in their family, but the white devil should mix their blood with the black nation in order to help destroy the black, but that they should not allow the black to mix with their blood. His aim was to kill and destroy the black nation. He ordered the nurses to kill all black babies that were born among his people by pricking the brains with a sharp needle as soon as the black child's head was out of the mother. So he's talking about abortion, right? So there's so many things here that he's discussing. He's talking about interracial marriage. But he's also talking about abortion, right? He's against interracial marriage. He's also against abortion. The Black Panther Party, as much as I hate them, they were right on abortion, right? So all the real pro-blacks were against abortion. The fake pro-blacks today are all about abortion. How weird is that? They're also against race mixing, which a lot of the pro-blacks today are against race mixing. So he's talking about killing black babies. We're going to skip down some. When there was a birth of a brown baby, the nurse would come and make much ado over it, would tell the mother that she had given birth to a holy child and that she would nurse it for the next 6 weeks. He has an obsession with the number 6, right? For her child was going to be a great man. After the first 200 years, Mr. YAKUB had done away with the black babies, and all were brown. After another 200 years, he had all yellow or red, which was 400 years after being on the island. Another 200 years, which brings us to the 600th year, Mr. YAKUB had an all pale white race of people on his isle. Of course, Mr. YAKUB lived but 150 years, but his ideas continued in practice. He gave his people guidance in the form of literature, what they should do and how they should do it. He said to them, when you become unalike, you may return to the Holy Land and people from whom you have been exiled. So, YAKUB died at age 150, but left teachings for these white devils to go back to the island, to go back to the city of Mecca, the holy city, and cause trouble. And apparently they're robots, and they decided to go and do this. He says the YAKUB made devils were really pale white with really blue eyes, which we think are the ugliest of colors for a human eye. They were called Caucasians, which means, according to some of the Arab scholars, one whose evil effect is not confined to oneself alone, but affects others. That is not what Caucasian means. Okay, he continues, says, there was no good taught to them while on the island. By teaching the nurses to kill the black baby and save the brown baby so as to graft the white out of it. Graft. That's his word for eugenics. Now, eugenics was a big thing in the 1920s, all right? In both Germany and in the United States, they were very big on eugenics. The belief that you could either breed out people that you hate or that you should prevent the breeding of people that you hate. So none of this seems like it's holy information. It seems like, these guys just grew up at a time where this kind of stuff was in the media a lot, and they're going through it. So to continue, he says, Muhammad, that would be the Muhammad of the Quran, was told that he could not reform the devils and that the race had 1,400 more years to live. The only way to make righteous people, Muslims, out of them was to graft them back into the black nation. So there was an idea that you could graft whites back into the black nation. It said this grieved Muhammad so much that it caused him heart trouble until his death. Okay. Muhammad, very upset about the fate of the white man, apparently. Even though Arabs are not white, Arabs have no interest in white people, from my understanding. Not really, anyway. I'm trying not to cover up this camera here. It says, the method the white race practices on the black nation the world over, they upset their peace by putting one against the other, and then rule them after dividing them. This is the reason why the American so-called Negroes can never agree on unity among themselves, which would put them on top overnight. The devils keep them divided by paid informers from among themselves. They keep such fools among us. So the white devils, they went back to Mecca. That's part of the story. I'm skipping ahead. It says, quote, after YAKUB's devils were among the holy people of Islam, the black nation, for 6 months, they had our people at war with each other. The holy people were unable to understand just why they could not get along in peace with each other until they took the matter to the king. The king told the holy people of the black nation that their trouble was caused by white devils in their midst, and that there would be no peace among them until they drove these white devils from among them. This is page 117 at this point. It says, so later it says, YAKUB's made devils were driven out of paradise into the hills of West Asia or Europe and stripped of everything but the language. They walked across the hot, sandy desert into the land where long years of both trouble and joy awaited them. But they finally made it. And then it says, once there, they were roped in to keep them out of paradise to make sure the Muslims who lived along the borders of East and West Asia were ordered to patrol to keep the YAKUB's devils in West Asia, now called Europe. So they created a wall, a border. No immigration by the white devils. This is immigration, brother. No white devils allowed in the holy city ever again. You were in the holy city for 6 months. You caused nothing but trouble, white devil. So he started talking about the patrollers and all this kind of stuff. And essentially, I think that's it says, YAKUB's race of white devils were exiled in the hills and caves of Europe. They were without anything to start civilization and became savages. They remained in such condition for 2,000 years, no guide or literature. They lost all knowledge of civilization. The Lord God of Islam, taught me that some of them tried to graft themselves back into the black nation, but they had nothing to go by. A few were lucky enough to make a start and got as far as what you would call the guerrilla. In fact, all of the monkey family are from this 2,000-year history of the white race in Europe. So, all monkeys are white people who are trying to graft themselves back into the black nation. That's the origin story of monkeys, according to the Nation of Islam, okay? So gorillas are white people who tried to graft themselves back into the black nation and failed. There was no grafting back, by the way. Spoiler alert, I hate to break it to you. Once you're white, you cannot be black again, ever. Being deprived of divine guidance for their disobedience, the making of mischief and causing bloodshed in the holy nation of the original black people by lies, they became so savage that they lost all their sense of shame. They started going nude as they do today. They became shameless. In the winter, they wore animal skins for clothes and grew hair all over their bodies and faces like all the other wild animals. In those days, they made their homes in the caves on hillsides. There is a whole chapter devoted to them in the Holy Quran. They had it very hard, trying to save themselves from being destroyed by wild beasts, which were plentiful at that time in Europe. Being without a guide, they started walking on their hands and feet like all animals, and learned to climb trees as well as any of the other animals. At night, they would climb into trees carrying large stones and clubs to fight the wild beasts that would come prowling at night to keep from eating them and their families. Their next and best weapons were dogs. Dogs. They tamed some of these dogs to live in the caves with them and their families to help protect them from the wild beasts. After a time, the dog held a high place among the family because of his fearlessness to attack the enemies of his master. Today, the dog is still loved by a white race. It's given more justice than the so-called Negroes, and it's called the white man's best friends. This comes from the days of the cave. So he's got an explanation for everything. Why do white people love dogs? Well, the dogs protected them when they were without civilization in the cave, right? So that's why they love dogs. Now, this is almost over. We're in the near the end of what happened to white people once they were cast out of Mecca. So now Moses comes into the story because Moses is the savior of white people. It says, after 2,000 years of living as a savage, Allah raised up Moses to bring the white race again into civilization, to take their place as rulers, as YAKUB had intended for them. Moses became their God and leader. He brought them out of the caves, taught them to believe in Allah, taught them to wear clothes, how to cook their food, how to season it with salt, because white people don't season food, right? How to cook their food, how to season it with salt, what beef they should kill and eat, and how to use fire for their service. Moses taught them against putting the female cow under burden. He established for them Friday, the day to eat fish, because, fish Fridays, right? They were so evil and savage that Moses had to build a ring of fire around him at night, and he would sleep in the center of that ring to keep the devils from harming him. They were afraid of fire, and they are still afraid of fire. It says, Allah said that one day Moses told them he was going to have fish come up from the sea, so that tomorrow we will have fish. On the next day, the fish were there. Moses had a boat to load up and sent up to Egypt. Moses said, see, the sea came up last night and brought us some fish. One of the savages was a little too smart, and he said to Moses, where is the water? From then on, Moses recognized that fact that he could not just say anything to them. He had a hard time trying to civilize them. Once they gave Moses so much trouble that he took a few sticks of dynamite, went up on the mountainside and placed them into the ground, and went back to get those who were giving him the most trouble. Moses blew their asses up. He dynamited white folks because they were getting on his nerves. Let's skip forward a little bit. Okay. It says, we all bear witness. This is page 121. We all bear witness that the scripture quoted above, that would be from Genesis, refers to the Caucasian race. Be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth and subdue it. That's from Genesis. They're saying this is about white people. They are the only people who answer that description and work out for the past 4,000 years. They have subdued the people and most every kind of living thing upon the earth. God has blessed them to exercise all their knowledge and blessed them with guides from among our own people and with the rain and seasons of the earth. Today, their wealth is great upon the earth. Their sciences of worldly good have sent them, not only after the wealth of other than their own people, but even after the lives of property of their own kind. They have tired to repeople the earth with their own kind by skillfully killing off the black man and mixing their blood with the black woman. But the job is too big for them to ever conquer. The black nation, including its other three colors, brown, red, and yellow, outnumber the white race 11-1. So white people will never really fully rule the earth, according to Elijah Muhammad. So their pale skin, their blue eyes, this is page 122, even disliked by themselves, their blue eyes. He hates blue eyes for some reason. He's got a deep hatred of blue eyes. There just can't be any sincere love or friendship for them. They are unlike and we are alike. Like repels, unlike attracts. The very characteristics of black and white are so very different. Black people have a heart of gold, love, and mercy. Such a heart nature did not give to the white race. This is where the so-called Negroes are deceived in this devil race. They think they have the same kind of heart, but the white race knows better. They have kept it a secret among themselves that they may be able to deceive the black people. They have been and still are successful in deceiving the black man under the guise of being the ones who want peace, love, and friendship with the world and with God, and at the same time making war with the world to destroy peace, love, and friendship of the black nation. A brother loves and desires for his brother what he desires for himself. So-called Negroes, do you have this kind of love and desire for the white race for you? Because I have shown you they are not your brothers by nature. They are fully showing you this day openly that they are different from you and you are different from them. So, Elijah Muhammad, that is the nature of white people and the creation of white people and the nature of the white man. It is crazy that you can buy this book anywhere on planet Earth. But you can see that there's so much in there. Now, the economic system that they talk about in Nature of the Black Man or Message to a Black Man is not bad. It's all about group economics and all that kind of stuff. You know, caring for yourself, looking after yourself, and all that kind of stuff. There's not a problem with that. But their origin story of where white people comes from is absolutely psychotic. It's psychotic. And it's not even consistent. It doesn't make sense. It's internally like, how could black men be God and all this kind of stuff and yet be ruled by white people? It's kind of crazy. You know, but you see that that sort of teaching is pervasive in the Hotep space, the woke black space, the oppressed blacks, the now whether the black man was the first people on earth, you know, because Africa might be the cradle of civilization and all that kind of stuff. That's neither here nor there as far as I'm concerned. The point of this whole thing is I'm not about to run around and say a whole group of people are evil just based off their skin color. But I certainly won't make the argument that their very nature is evil, that there's no good that they know or learn. Now, this is basically a comic book that tells you the same thing I just read, except it's in comic form. So, and they actually take some liberties with the story. As you can see, the size of YAKUB's head, that's a lot of writing on this page, brother. That's a lot of writing. See, there's the king. There's baby YAKUB with the size. Look at the size of his head. My God, he got the mega mind. See, this is what he was thinking of as a baby. They tell his origin story just a little bit different, though. It says here that his parents were arrested by royal guards. That's not. Can you see it? And this was the source of his hatred for his own kind. And you can see here that there's a. I think that it says in this book that YAKUB was a child born not out of wedlock, but that his father was having an affair. Yeah. The baby who was given the name YAKUB was the result of adultery, a love affair between a royal crown prince and a peasant girl. And then, of course, when this is found out, his parents are arrested. And this is, of course, what makes him dun, 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 YAKUB, the father of the white devil race. Okay. So let's go through this book a little bit. I don't want to read the whole thing because it's kind of flimsy, but I just want to show you some important things. This is YAKUB, and he gets older. This is after the exile. YAKUB has been exiled, and he's swearing revenge on his brothers, the other princes. So he's a prince in this book. He's supposed to be a scientist. So he's like Bardock now. They're taking liberties with his origin story. And this is the act of YAKUB making the white race. He's having sex with all of the black women. YAKUB copulates with all of his female followers and gets them all pregnant. With his wicked plan is to breed the melanin out of the people and thus create a race that is antithesis to the Ebenoids, to create an evil, remorseless race lacking in divinity. notice that it didn't say anywhere that YAKUB is having sex with these people and message to a black man. So he basically just kind of filled that part in. And there it is, the white devil. Look at the fangs. They all look like Dracula. That's amazing. The following 600 years of eugenic experiments, YAKUB creation had finally reached perfection. The result, a race completely lacking in divinity. A race with one sole instinct, one singular purpose, to bring forth the total eradication of black people. Yes, dear reader, the white devil race is born. The white devils. And look how badass these evil white people look. My goodness. And look, the white man is kicking the black people's ass in Arabia. Look at this shit. It's psychotic. Like, you wouldn't believe none of this shit if you thought white people were normal or if white people didn't have superpowers, right? So there's the white people. This is their home. So the homes that white people live in. They're eating meat, raw meat, because he's got fangs like a dog. See, and here's the white man with his dog, and here's the white man wrestling, and here's the white reproductive element. It says the females of their kind endure perpetual pregnancies. And according to ancient accounts, it was not unusual for a white female to bear a gruesome tally of 20 children during her pitiful lifespan. This, of course, was a knock on white people who had a lot of children in like farming communities, especially like Catholics and like the Amish who don't believe in birth control. So sometimes they would have like really big families. So this is kind of like a knock on them, even though, part of it is because in Africa they don't have a lot of big families. Because, and I read this in an article that because the poverty was such in Africa, it wasn't inducive to having big families, unless you were rich, of course. But that they would see twins as a curse. And this is something that stuck with me forever when I read it. I just can't remember where I read it from. But it was a story that, somebody prayed for a baby and they got two babies, twins. And they say sometimes you pray for rain and you get a thunderstorm because it's impossible for them to take care of two babies in a poor society. So they would take both of the babies and put them out in the bush. And whichever one survives is the one that you would raise. So, but that's just, who knows? That might be one of those white devil tricks. So here's the white people. They look like Titans from Attack on Titan. Just look at that. Look at the deal. It's a beautiful art piece. They look like Attack of the Titans. Here's the white man becoming a gorilla. He says, alas, the fate of these hapless creatures was more strange than anyone could have foreseen. Instead of achieving their dreams of becoming black, they evolved into what we today know as the mighty gorilla. The gorilla. The white man is a gorilla. Amazing. I bought this book just for this stuff, just to supplement that book, just to supplement Elijah Muhammad's book. Here's the whites and the blacks fighting. Look at how easily he tears the black man's head off. Look, you would not do something like, if the white man is so strong, he can crush your entire body with his hand. Look at this. You trying to tell me that the white man is not a superhero? This is a full belief that the white man is a superior Ubermensch, that your small, frail black body will just crumble under the pressure of one white man's hand. Look at that shit. Look at this psychotic stuff here. This guy got a razor to the neck. Good Lord. I mean, he's just having a bad day. Look at this. And this guy lost an eyeball. Man, these white people are having way too much fun. Look at this guy. He's just chasing this hapless dude back here, man. This guy is in trouble. That white man is on his ass. Poor dude. Poor fella. And look, the white man is reveling in all his death and destruction. He's having so much fun. Look at that devil. Look at that evil bastard. Look at that blood all over his fangs. Look at how easily he tears black people's heads off. Paint the streets with their blood. Kill them all. I want to make a throne out of their skulls. Look at this madness. Look at this madness. And YAKUB he's having much fun. He's having so much fun watching his white people destroy these Negroes. Now, of course, if you was following Elijah Muhammad's story, YAKUB would not be around for this because white people was not fully formed until after he passed. But you can see that he's telling a unique story here. So YAKUB is having a blast. Mecca is burning. It has begun. Go on, my children. Go on. Avenge your father. Show those filthy darkies what happens when you humiliate YAKUB. Unreal. And here it is, YAKUB. Oh, my king. Order your demons to leave. Never. I don't understand you. What is it that you want? The crown? No, brother. I want. Look at the veins in his head. My God, why you got so many veins in his head? What's that about? Revenge! This is Sparta! Kicked him off the top of this tower. And he's yeah. YAKUB is black. He's one of the 24 scientists, or in this story, he's a prince. So YAKUB hates black people. But he's black. Now we get to the irony. Beautiful, beautiful irony. The white people have decided that YAKUB is black. Oh, my beloved children, I have witnessed your destruction of Mecca, and my heart swells with pride. What a blessing it is for a father to watch his sons display such magnificent strength, such exquisite, beautiful cruelty. This old fool thinks he knows us. Let's kill him. Agreed. He's got a stone in his hand. But I'm YAKUB. I created you. Don't you know me? No, I created you. You can't. Don't you get it? I must, for it is my nature. You made me, YAKUB. You made me the murderer I am, YAKUB. And boom, there it is. YAKUB is dead. Murdered by white people. Look at his brain matter is out. His brain is exposed. He's like he's been fighting in UFC 306. His brain's exposed. Good Lord. Got so much brain. He got so much brain out. This ends the story of YAKUB, killed by the hand of his own creation. Oh, YAKUB. Oh, brother. And of course, we start talking about whites taking over the earth and slavery. Slavery. And that's the end. YAKUB, the white devil race. Amazing. There's so much material like this floating around. I love reading this kind of stuff, even though I don't believe it, because it entertains me. I have a book written by the Black Hebrew Israelites. It's going to be a while for me to go through that, but I'm going to end up doing that one on this channel too. I want to find out who did Noble Drew Ali write a book. If so, I'm going to actually find that too. So what I am is a person that is very interested in origin stories. As a writer, I'm always interested in how societies talk about their origin stories. And that leads me to following all kinds of weird religions and and following into cultures because it's all cultural. So you learn like every indigenous or what we call Indian Native American society has their own origin story. You know, how the earth came to be, how they came to be, what their relationship is with gods and earths and stuff like that. And every African tribe has the same thing. Every society on earth has their own origin story. And what you would typically see in cults, it's cults have their own origin story too. Just like the Book of Mormon, where you have or in Muslim societies or whatever, it'll be a different origin story where how the society was formed, usually around the central figure, the guy who created the religion. Scientology. I tried getting through Scientology. I couldn't get through it. It's a disaster. I couldn't get through that shit. But it's like you have a second spirit living in you or some kind of nonsense that they say. It's called a Thetan or something stupid like that. But I used to take notes of all this kind of stuff. But it gets very extensive because there have been over 50 Native American tribes. And the Chippewa and the Seminole and all these different people, they all believe different things. They have different cultures. Now, to the average person, they don't know the difference between a Chippewa and an Ottawa. They don't know anything about that, but other people do. But then you realize that a lot of these urban societies have their own cultures too, because they have these little cults in them, like the Nation of Islam, like the Nation of Gods and Earths, like the Moorish Science Temple. And these organizations provide an origin story that is satisfactory to the people who join these organizations. Now, I grew up listening to people from the Nation of Islam. Not one time have I ever heard about YAKUB. Never. I grew up really being a fan of like Muhammad Ali and grew up again with people who followed the Nation of Gods and Earths. Not one person has ever mentioned YAKUB. White people being born in the Caucasus Mountains or the caves or whatever, yeah, you hear that a lot. But some of the psyop, the really, really off-putting stuff, that's in Message to the Black Man, you never hear about that stuff, ever. And nobody has ever mentioned it, ever. And there's a reason for that, because they already know that some of that stuff is off-putting. They want to make sure that you're on the team before they start telling you this kind of stuff. Once you start getting involved with them, then they start telling you some of the juicier stuff. That's like when you get into a Scientology and they start telling you, you know, about the Thetans and all that kind of shit. You got to be in it for a while because they already know that if they tell you that stuff up front, you're going to run off. And I was listening to Daryl Cooper, who does the Modern Made podcast. This is very important stuff because he's been in the media recently because he talked about Churchill. And he was telling me about Jim Jones. He was talking about Jim Jones on his podcast. And Jim Jones was a regular Christian preacher. But the longer people stayed with him, the more he started to unravel some of the stuff that, was real. One, that Jim Jones was never really a Christian. He was an atheist. Second, he was a communist, a socialist. Third, he believed that he was God. And then, but at this point in time, he becoming more and more popular. And his church is swelling, and he's got such control over the masses that they don't really even notice the pivot between talking about Jesus and now Jesus doesn't even matter. And he's talking about your sky god can't do anything for you. I'm your God. And everybody's like, yeah, you are my God. Well, okay, how did we get there? How do we I went to a Christian church and all of a sudden I'm worshiping Jim Jones? How did that happen? Well, because he wasn't a true believer anyway. All this stuff, it was all politics and stuff with him. He got you to drop your guard and you started really just kind of buying into all the stuff that he said. So when you're in something like the Nation of Islam and you're trying to figure out, especially since a lot of their converts tend to be people who went to jail, they're trying to figure out why their lives are in such disarray. They're looking for answers. And these guys provide very convenient answers. So it's very interesting to me to learn this stuff and to know about it and to share what I learned with other people just in case other people fall into it. And I know there's probably going to end up being eventually somebody from the Nation of Islam going to stumble across this channel and listen to this and say, what the hell is wrong with you? Why would you say all this stuff? But you believe dumb shit, all right? You believe that a man is Allah. That's nonsense. You know, this is your belief. It's not mine. You know, it is what it is. That's why I turned the video on for this to make sure to show people that I actually had the book. All right. So on page 31 from Message to the Black Man in America, it says, "It is Allah's will and purpose that we shall know ourselves. Therefore, he came himself to teach us the knowledge of self, who is better knowing of who we are than God. He has declared that we are the descendants of the Asian black nation and the tribe of Shabazz." You might ask, who is this tribe of Shabazz? Originally, they were the tribe that came with the earth, or this part of the earth, 66 trillion years ago, when a great explosion of our planet divided it into two parts. One we call Earth, and the other the moon. So 66 trillion years ago, according to the Nation of Islam, our home planet was divided into two parts, one Earth, one moon. Okay? So this is the collision theory. You know, some people truly believe this is how we came to have a moon. That the moon collided or the Earth collided with another thing, and the moon is a piece of that. But they're talking about there being a different planet that was then divided into the Earth. It says, we, the tribe of Shabazz, says Allah, were the first to discover the best part of our planet to live on, the rich and Nile Valley of Egypt, and the present seat of the holy city Mecca, Arabia. The origin of our kinky hair, says Allah, came from one of our dissatisfied scientists 50,000 years ago, who wanted to make all of us tough and hard in order to endure the life of the jungles of East Asia or Africa, and to overcome the beasts there. But he failed to get the others to agree with him. So why do we need kinky hair? Are we supposed to like choke the lions with our kinky hair? Oh, don't eat me, Mr. Jaguar. Is there jaguars in Africa? No. Uh, cheetahs. There's a cheetah. Don't eat us, Mr. Cheetah. You're going to choke on our kinky hair. What the hell is he talking about? What the hell is he talking about? But you got to already believe this stuff before you can receive this kind of information. But there's plenty of stuff in here to like, you know, in terms of this book, Message to the Black Man in America. And this book was written 1973. So it was printed in 1973. So there you go. YAKUB, The Nature of the White Devil, and where black people come from according to the Nation of Islam. We are the tribe of Shabazz, who has been here 66 trillion years. Our planet, I guess, collided with a different organism, and we were ended up on the earth living in the Nile Valley. BEP is tricknology, what they use to pick the new SmackDown thing. Yeah, I think so. You got to understand that the white devil wants everybody to like Megan Thee Stallion, even though nobody seems to like Megan Thee Stallion that much. Okay. But it's amazing that most people don't read these documents for themselves. They come across it when dealing with other people. Let me see if I got some Nation of Gods and Earths PDFs on my tablet before I wrap this up, because it's bothering me that I don't know my supreme mathematics like I know I should. But I didn't study that stuff. I only listened to, very important people in my life talk to me about it. I'm not a joiner. I don't really join things and look at things and listen to people that much, which is probably why I never did like I do live streams with other people seldomly and stuff like that. I'm not really a joiner myself. If I'd have heard some weird shit, like I'll listen, I'll hear you out. You got something you want to say, but I don't buy into that stuff. See, do I got? Oh, let me put in supreme math. I don't think I usually have like a supreme mathematics PDF file or something, but I don't got one. Maybe I got it on my phone or something. Either way, but you can see how a lot of things spin out of Message to the Black Man in America, and there likely was some kind of intellectual tradition that was created spinning around a lot of these pro-black movements. Things like the ISIS papers, things like they came before Columbus, Sheikh Anta Diop, all these different historians and all this stuff. It's all interesting to read. You can't take too much of it seriously because it's all about centering black people as the most important people on earth and countering the narrative that white people are the most interesting people on earth. But you don't really need to do that. It comes across as if people who are insecure and have low self-esteem. And typically that's what a lot of this stuff boils down to is you uplift blacks by tearing down whites, and it's supposed to ease your insecurity, make you feel better about yourself. The ISIS papers is psychotic. Now, I have an ISIS papers PDF. Now, there are things in the ISIS papers, obviously, because there's always a germ of truth in there. But there's a lot of crazy shit in the ISIS papers by Francis Cress Wilson. And there's going to tell you there's a bunch of hoteps that are probably trying to cut my goddamn throat because I don't like Francis Cress Wilson. But I do have the ISIS papers. I had the physical book. I gave it away. Because I was laughing at it and I thought it was ridiculous. But I do have a PDF file now, and I got it open. It says, and this is from the ISIS paper, this is in the preface: white supremacy, domination, and oppression of all non-white people is essential for the global white genetic survival. The prevention of white genetic annihilation is pursued through all means, including chemical and biological warfare. Today, the white genetic survival imperative, instead of using chemicals in gas chambers, is using chemicals on the streets: crack, crank, cocaine, ecstasy, PCP, heroin, methadone, all designer chemicals. Ultimately, these chemicals are produced by whites and made available to urban blacks, particularly black males, upon whom the future of black people is dependent. The core dynamic of white genetic survival eventually leads whites to a major act of genocide, destruction of the genes of non white people, or toward genocidal imperatives. Such a genocide occurred in Nazi Germany, where the Semite and Gypsy populations were classified as non white and therefore were destroyed. So, Francis Cress Welsing is supposed to be a psychologist. That's what you're supposed to. And it's important that people know when you read these people that they have sometimes doctorates. Like I think she has a doctorate. And Dr. Claude Anderson, who you would think is a doctor of economics, he's a doctor of education, which is not bad, but his books are on economics. um, that should raise an eyebrow. But Francis Cress Welsing is a psychologist or a psychiatrist, one or the other. Similarly, so is Frantz Fanon, who wrote Red to the Earth, Black Skin, White Mass. I came to read those books in college. Francis Cress Welsing in the ISIS paper says the genocide of non-whites must be understood as a necessary tactic of a people, white, that is a minority of the world's population, and that because it lacks genetic capacity to produce significant levels of melanin, is genetically recessive in terms of skin coloration compared to the black, brown, red, and yellow of the world majority. Thus, the global white minority must act genocidally against people of color for the purpose of white genetic survival. This is the kill or be killed mentality. This is the reason that persons who classify themselves as whites behaved genocidally towards Semites in the Holocaust in Nazi Germany. This is also the reason that persons who classify themselves as white behaved and still behave genocidally towards the indigenous inhabitants of Western Hemisphere who were classified as red, non-white. Now, notice they use the same colors as Message to the Black Man, right? The black, the white, the red, and the yellow. Where does the so I'll give her some credit. White genetic survival is an important imperative, as it is to every society, right? Um, one day I'm going to read through the ISIS papers all over again, and then do a similar video that I did on YAKUB on the ISIS papers. The keys to the colors. I'm about the physical book again because I want to read it all over again, and I'm gonna do a similar dive into it. It won't be like a complete review. It's just going to be looking at some of the more crazier things that's in it. And but back to what I was saying, the desire for genetic survival is inherent in all living things. Everything wants to continue its wants to continue its kind. It's an instinct. White people were obsessed with genetic survival in the eugenics years, what's called the progressive era. You don't hear a lot about the progressive era because it was a lot about socialist economics and eugenics. And I just read a book called Illiberal Reformers that was about the progressive era and about a lot of white people's obsession with eugenics and not wanting morons, blacks, and others to reproduce. So there's a certain element of that's in the ISIS papers that is prevalent. However, like I said, that exists in all peoples. And also, if you actually looked at the information that involves eugenics, it included other white people, what we consider white people. Now, understand the term white has changed over time. You know, Italians didn't used to be white. Russians didn't used to be white. The Irish didn't used to be white. So when they talk about white genetic survival, they were talking about white Americans. When you read a lot of material about eugenics, a lot of that stuff was they didn't like immigrants of any kind. Like you think that all that Trump shit they talk about today is, oh, he's talking about Haitians eating cats and dogs and all this kind of stuff. That stuff is embedded in the United States. The dislike of outsiders coming in and bringing their outsider cultures into society, eating weird things, speaking weird ways, engaging in weird behaviors. Americans have never been a fan of that, you know? So that kind of thing has always occurred. They've always wanted to prevent Jews, Italians, or Catholics, because that would be Italians, that would be the Irish as well. Um, also, some Russians and other people who are not American born from reproducing. But it was not a mass white thing. It was uniquely they wanted more American babies, less Negro babies, less immigrant babies, and it was the same thing with the Chinese and all that kind of stuff. Now, the idea that whites are a uh, minority on planet Earth, that is also true. You know, there was a conversation that Tucker Carlson had with Daryl Cooper, the guy behind the Martyr Made podcast, and they were telling the story that Ireland is the home of the ethnically Irish people, the only place that they've ever known, and the only home that they've ever had. So when you have mass immigration of Black Africans into Ireland, you're changing the very you're running the risk of pushing the only home these people have, into making them a minority in their own home. And it's the same thing with England. And it's the same thing with Italy. These are ethnically different populations, and they are relatively small populations. To overrun them with Africans is to dilute them in the world population. Of course, that leads to intermixing and all that kind of stuff, interbreeding and everything, which of course changes the racial element of the country. That's a blood and soil argument. People don't like blood and soil arguments. That immediately takes you to Nazi Germany. All right, almost immediately. But blood and soil arguments is what 99% of the world is about. The only country that is not a blood and soil place is the United States, because being an American is an idea. Anybody can come here and be an American. The same has never been this. It has never been that way for France. It has never been that way for England. It has never been that way for Ireland. It's not that way for African countries. You can't just go to Nigeria and be, Igbo or whatever. It don't work that way. They're not going to accept that. You're not going to go to South Africa and proclaim yourself Zulu and then that's it. It just don't work that way. So how is it that you can just walk up into Ireland and say that you're Irish? That doesn't work that way. Yes, this is exactly the same rhetoric that's being used against the Chinese in Africa. It was also the same rhetoric used against the Nigerians in Kenya. It's the same rhetoric that is used by the Pakistanis when the Indians come over. Genetically, they're the same people, but no. Pakistanis they want to be a unique culture. They don't want these Indians coming over here and messing around. It's the same thing when you have the Haitians and the Dominicans. They don't want them coming over there and screwing them. No. Take your ass back on the other side of that border. You're riffraff. But that would require for you to actually think about things outside of a racial element. So when you see like J.D. Vance or Donald Trump talking about, Haitians eating dogs and shit, this shit probably, is it true? Who knows? I don't know that much about Haiti. You know, I did see the Haitian guy grab a duck and snap its neck right there on camera. But you know, weirder shit I've seen. I've seen people do weirder shit than kill ducks with their bare hands. Okay, I've seen an African chick crack a chicken's neck with her bare hands before it happens. You know, it's about as clean as it's going to get when it comes to hunting. You know, but people don't like blood and soil arguments. But sometimes you got to make a blood and soil argument because people don't understand it. This is the only home these people have, and you're overrunning them with immigrants. Now, the United States is much different from Ireland and England and some of the other places this stuff is happening there. You can't say that whites are native to the United States. They're not. They're immigrants. All whites are immigrants in the United States. In North America, period. They're all whites are immigrants in North America. No matter how long you've been here, you probably came here on a boat. Your ancestors came here on a boat. So the idea that they can prevent other people from coming here is likely incorrect. You can be as mad about it as you want. And I'm not thrilled about, you know, hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans taking over shit in Colorado or engaging in, you know, I think it's Mexicans that are engaging in pretty much ethnic cleansing of black people in like Oakland and other places in South California. That stuff's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. But that's where you know your society needs to kick in, and you need to straighten this out. And immigration in small numbers is not a problem. It's these immigration in large unchecked numbers that's a problem. And how the fuck did Haitians get from Haiti to Ohio? Nobody's been able to answer that question. How did they get to Ohio? Why Ohio? Like Haitians in Florida is not that big a deal because Haitians are always been in Florida. Haitians in Louisiana, that's natural because there's a big Creole population in Louisiana. They likely would not change the culture of Louisiana at all. Alabama, Mississippi, not that big a deal, right? But Ohio, how did they even get in Ohio? And how did so many of them get to Ohio? That's a little bit problematic. You know, that's a little bit of a problem. But people don't like blood and soil arguments because they make them seem like Nazis. But it's a legitimate concern. It's a legitimate concern for a lot of the European nations. So I feel bad for them, kind of. I mean, a lot of them did it to themselves with their colonization. You know, you colonized parts of Africa, and you basically gave all the Africans free range to come to meet and be French. So now, like, a whole hell of a lot of your Olympic team is black. That's your fault. You shouldn't even went fucking around in Africa. You did what you did. Now this is what you get. You know, but Ireland never did that. Ireland never invaded anybody and forced themselves onto others. If anything, the Irish have been subdued by the English for hundreds of years at this point. They didn't ask for this. So you gotta that's why you can't make it a racial argument. You gotta look at it in terms of the history of the land, the people, and there's not much you can do because the governments of these societies seemingly are okay with it. You know, so press Noctis. It will be here when you're ready for it. Because I'm just going to close up shop in a few seconds. I was just closing up on immigration because I think the ISIS papers is going to be the next thing, but I want to order the book again first. So it might not get done until like November. I have tons of reading material. I don't know if you guys like peeped it, but I got like tons of shit I need to read. BEP says, then is America going to have a problem with civic nationalism if they're going to laugh at the French? Probably, because France is fucked. England and France are, you can forget it. It's like nothing but Arabs and Africans at this point. And, and like for instance, there's a lot of people who like want the Puerto Ricans to be like Puerto Rico to be a state. It's like, well, that should be the choice of the Puerto Ricans of whether they want to be a state or not. They might like the position that they're in right now. They might not want to be a state. But if they do, then they have a very large Spanish speaking population. And I would say you should just send all your Mexicans to Puerto Rico. It's a different Spanish, but it's mostly the same. So I would send all the Mexican immigrants to Puerto Rico. Like all of you sons of bitches go to Florida, California, Arizona, Texas, and Puerto Rico. Like everybody get out of here. There's no reason for any Mexicans to be in Iowa. It literally doesn't make sense. What are you in Iowa for? Nobody speaks your language there. Go where people already speak the language. Gozu94 says Ireland was the British guinea pig when it first came to colonization. Yeah, and it's really unfortunate that they're going to end up being, I don't know how else to say it, but ethnically cleansed out of their own society. Unchecked immigration, just unyielding immigration. There's not that many Irish people on planet Earth. Once you start overrunning their country with my fear, and I'm gonna close on this. My greatest fear is that it's going to end up violent. My greatest fear is that there will eventually be like some crazy Hitler-like figure in Ireland or in England, and they're gonna start ethnically cleansing Africans and Arabs and all the people out of the country. So my thing is, and history says that it will happen. If those people get to the point where they're on the brink of extinction, they're gonna say, nope. They're gonna start blowing shit up. BEP says, by the way, I'm putting in a vote for your lecture on France Fanon for our French friends. Oh yeah, I can go crack open France Fanon because he went into this about, but he always said that you'll never be as French as the Frenchman. You'll always be an African. That was his concept in a Black Skin White Mask. That you try to learn French better than the Frenchman, but you'll never be French. You'll just always be African. Which is similar because it was to how a lot of people have talked about Black people in America. He's kind of a follower of negritude, Amy Césaire. I had a pamphlet on Amy Césaire, but I don't know where it went. I don't know if I gave so many books away because I was trying to educate other people, but I never got those things back. So it is what it is. But at least I remember some of these things. But Frantz Fanon was radical. He is a radical psychologist, and I think it was it Algeria while it was under French occupation. Yeah, he's Fanon was something else. I mean, getting into the African stuff, that's when I started really kind of pulling back from being like a full blown communist. I was reading that shit and was like, man, these dudes are too hardcore. I can't get with some of this shit. And then I guess once you start getting caught up in the plight of South Africa, you're like, wait a minute, I'm off the reservation. I need to focus more on home. But yeah, I read like Stephen Biko. I got his book. I Write What I Like. I got that I got that in around here somewhere. I read about Amy Césaire. Read about Frantz Fanon. Um, I don't have any books by Kwame Nkrumah, but I read about him. And plus, a lot of the Black Panthers and all those kinds of people, they skipped the country. They went over to Africa. Like I think Eldridge Cleaver, when he left the United States, he went over to Algeria, where he was calling for people to shoot police officers and shit while he was hiding in Algeria. Stokely Carmichael, I think, moved to Africa. So did W.B. Du Bois. But I mean, it's nice to know that some of these countries overlap to a degree. the struggles overlap. But that's the important element, is that, when you're dealing with, but it was a really silly, it brings out silly arguments, like, I believe Stokely Carmichael wrote it in the book Black Power, that blacks in the United States were a colonized people. It's like, bro, this was a slave class. It is not a colonized people. Colonized people will be like the the Irish, like that's a completely different concept. It's just like we try to wrap all forms of oppression into one thing. It's like, no, it's not, you know. And then in the 1960s, you were substantially less oppressed than 20 years prior, which was less oppressive than 20 years prior. You know, so he was far less oppressed than his grandparents were. But you can't tell people that, because, and then once you realize, like, that student organizations, all those Black Panther parties and all this kind of shit, those are like the first real generation of black people who to go to college. And that really is somebody that kind of, I forgot who woke me up to that you didn't see all of this stuff before then, because there were not large masses of black people going to college like it was in the 60s. And then all of a sudden there's like waves and waves of black kids going to college. And they're joining these radical organizations. And all of a sudden you're in the streets preaching Marxism. And they're going to the hoods and preaching that Marxism. And that's what ended up, all these organizations ended up being mostly thugs anyway. That's why I don't really care for the Black Panther Party. I mean, I used to think highly of them like most people did. And then you have to start asking some questions. And I started having some of my questions answered, and I didn't like the answer. Like, you started saying, like, really, they got in, the COINTELPRO happened because, well, the Black Panthers, well, they were giving away free medicine, and they were giving away free food, and that's all they were doing. It's like, oh, well, fuck the police, man. They're just trying to feed flapjacks to the babies. And then you're like, wait a second. Where did they get the money for all this shit from? Oh, they were robbing banks. Oh, they were robbing drug dealers. Holy shit. No wonder so many of them got shot and killed. Or they were getting into shootouts with the cops. Oh, wow. No wonder so many of them got killed. Start making sense when you start asking important questions, like, how are they funding all of these organizations? Well, some of it was, rich white Jews giving them money. I mean, that's how they got out of jail so many times, because they had radical lawyers, rich white Jews that was helping to defend them. That's how, Ashala Shakur is not in prison right now, because of rich white Jews. But that was part of it. But they were funding their day to day, because none of these people had jobs. Their job was the revolution. Their job was to go drive around with a video camera agitating police officers. That was their job. They didn't have like a regular job. So how are they making any money? Donations can only go so far. You're asking for donations from poor people. They don't have a lot of money. And you're going to set up a soup kitchen where you're feeding people? Where's the food coming from? Or they were robbing grocery stores. And you're just saying, like, oh, okay, I get it. I get it. They were forcing people to donate. And if they didn't, they were robbing them. And then they were threatening them. And then you learn that's why all these people were getting killed and getting arrested. Because they were fucking criminals. And that's really what it boiled down to. They claimed to have a good cause, but in reality, they were criminals. And then you started asking, what was the results? And the results were the same shit going on today than what they were fighting in the 60s. So what did they do? They did nothing. They made themselves famous. They wrote magazines talking about how great they were. They got on the cover of Newsweek. People turned them into heroes, but ultimately there's nothing. They didn't start not one school, no hospitals. It was all about free clinics, but they didn't start a hospital because they didn't believe in that kind of stuff. They were communists. So they didn't believe in creating anything that was going to last for a long time, because that would have meant they actually had to have accountability. They would have had to produce something. So all these people, and some of them had levels of education, but they only had levels of education to where their role in the revolution could work. Like Asada Shakur, she was a quote unquote revolutionary medic. Basically, she did first aid. If you got shot, she could keep you alive for a little while. That didn't translate to a hospital or a clinic or anything like that. It just translated to her riding around in the car, and if somebody got beat up, she could stitch up their lip. Or somebody got shot, she might be able to keep them alive long enough to get them to the hospital. That was it. That was her skill set. Angela Davis, similar. Angela Davis is a foul creature. All right. If you ever want to talk about how fucked up Angela Davis is, you should look up Jonathan Jackson. He was 17 years old. His brother was Soledad brother, George Jackson, a thug, a brutal thug, by the way, who is in prison, wrote a book called Soledad Brother that he might not have even fully written. Now, I just been reading Brian Burroughs' book, Days of Rage, and it really just it struck me when they talked about Soledad Brother, the book. 'Cause I read Soledad Brother, and they was talking about how the people who published the book, for starters, he was fucking his lawyer, because almost all of them were. These white Jew women were falling in love with these black inmates. They loved them. That was part of the reason why so many of these organizations fall apart. It's because their women started fucking other people. But she heavily edited Soledad Brother. And I'm saying, like, how much editing was it? Because I know that from slave narratives, if the slave was partially literate, then the writer was usually a white person, and they would fictionalize it a little bit. So you have to ask the question of how many of these people were capable of writing their own books. But anyway, Jonathan Jackson was 17 years old. His brother was in prison. Angela Davis gives this kid a gun. The kid then uses the gun to take a judge hostage to try to get his brother freed. He ends up shooting the judge in the face and gets himself killed. He gets turned into a martyr. He was 17 years old. And Angela Davis was never held accountable for giving him the gun. He couldn't have got it any other way. Instead of, influencing him to be a lawyer or something, even though I really hate radical lawyers. Radical lawyers are scumbags, but that would have been a better usage of a 17-year-old than turning him into some kind of street soldier to get his face blown off. But that's the kind of shit that they like to do, because for them, martyrs matter more than average people. That's the kind of shit. That's why they like Fred Hampton so much. Fred Hampton was 21. They threw that boy's life away. Got him involved with this bullshit. And he got killed. It's unfortunate, but that's the story of the Black Panther Party, to get young black people wrapped up in shit where they worshiping Ho Chi Minh and Mao Zedong and Lenin and everything, and they go out there and they get killed, or they end up in prison. Nothing's changed. Everything's the same. And your life is just thrown away. And then, of course, nobody remembers you unless they decide to put out a stupid movie using your name and likeness. Otherwise, you're just another dead nigga, which is unfortunate. I would think people would have more respect for their own lives than this. Do I have a list of these books? I can make one. Every book that I've talked about, I've read. Either I read a PDF version of it or I've read a hard book of it. But it depends. Like, join the Discord and you can ask for books about on a different subject, and if I got one, or I'll tell you about it if I read something about it. But I'm all for self-defense organizations. You know, I'm not for the Black Panthers though. They you know they involve themselves into too much chaos in the Black community. Too many Black boys died following it behind these dudes who ended up being heroin addicts and crackheads. Like, that's the thing that's another thing that really pissed me off. Like, Huey Newton ended up being a heroin addict. And he was supposed to be super smart brother. Come on, man. That's a shame, bro. These guys were throwing their lives away. I mean, there were so many people. Like, if you read like Days of Rage by Brian Burrow, I walked away more disgusted. And as much as I really, really dislike a lot of these Black organizations that engaged in shit like shootouts with the police and bank robberies and everything, I have a greater disgust for the white ones, because so many of them got away with it. And they got away with it because, not just because they're white, because a lot of them had money to begin with. And they're so weak and pathetic that they wanted to be a part of what the Black people, they worship Black people. That's really what it boiled down to. All of them wanted to be Black Panthers, but they couldn't because they were white. And they had the same issues that Antifa have today. We cannot be a proper revolutionary army because all of us are white. We have to have some kind of Black leadership. We need a Black field general. So whoever this rich white girl, whatever inmate she was banging, she brings him to the meeting, and now he's going to be the leader. So all the guys who were doing all the planning and the plotting and had all the ideas, he gets his nuts cut off because he's white. And he's got to just take it. That's a certain level of disgust that comes with that. If you're the big bad revolutionary, you're going to be the guy that's going to build the bombs and all this. And then some meek white woman tells you that you're not a real revolutionary because you're not Black. You're not part of the third world, man. You're not oppressed. And you're like, well, damn, that's right. I need a Black man to lord over me and tell me what to do. It's pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. The progressive stack existed in the 60s. That's why it exists today. And then the crazy thing is, a lot of the COINTELPRO stuff is it's real, but it's also quite overblown. Again, a lot of the reason why people fell apart is because things got real radical real quick. There were people who were crazy who wanted to shoot cops and blow up buildings, and then that creates a niche group because everybody's like, yeah, I'm all for being a communist and subverting and blah 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 blah. But I don't want to blow up no buildings. I don't want to kill no police officers, man. I don't want to do that kind of shit. And then once they started doing that, you're in the cult. So all the cult behavior starts. You got it. With Weatherman, the group that Bill Ayers used to be a part of. Bill Ayers is the mentor of Barack Obama. And if I remember correctly, Kathy Boudin is the mentor for Black Lives Matter, if I remember correctly. But they used to do what's called smash monogamy, where they would force couples to break up by forcing them to engage in orgies. So you had to be, in order to be a proper revolutionary, you had to watch your girlfriend get a train ran on her by somebody else, a bunch of other guys. And then the point is, a lot of them were having sex with each other. The men were having sex with each other. The women were having sex with each other. They would do drugs and fuck each other, and that would cause untold amounts of discomfort in these organizations, and that used to piss people off, and that's why they started to leave. They didn't start leaving because people got arrested. The guy would leave because his girlfriend got caught up in this wanderlust and started fucking 2 or 3 of the guys in the group. And so he was like, I can't take this, I'm out of here. They were taking wives from their husbands. There's a story of Weatherman taking a woman and her children and using them essentially as beards while they were doing bombings. They were taking children with them. So, nobody's going to stop us if we got kids with us. This is horrible shit. These are terrible psychopathic people. And they got away with it because the FBI broke too many laws. So that was unfortunate, but they got away with it. And that's why I say I got a greater hatred for them. Because the Negroes didn't get away with shit. All right. They were getting shot in the street. They were going to prison. They were getting their asses beat. Meanwhile, the white dudes were sitting around fucking each other's girlfriends, getting high, blowing up buildings, and then when it all crashed down, none of them went to jail. They got probation and a bunch of other shit. That shit pissed me off. Untold numbers of black people got murdered in the 60s and 70s by police officers because they were engaging in quote unquote revolutionary bullshit. Right? The white people who were doing it, most of them got away with it. Now, in some of the organizations, they ended up getting killed. Like the Patty Hearst situation, where almost all of them got killed, except for a few of them. They ended up going to prison. But the black dude who kidnapped her ended up getting killed. His, I think, Korean girlfriend or something. She was white mixed or something like that. She ended up getting killed too. But today I was going to talk about smash monogamy throughout the entire thing because it's an important element. I might do that next week. But reading about smash monogamy, I was like, my lord, that's the cult behavior right there. When you show up with your girlfriend and they tell you cannot have a girlfriend, they tell you you're not allowed to have babies. If your girlfriend gets pregnant, she's got to have an abortion. Oh, marriage is a bourgeoisie value, even though all of them ended up getting married in the end. I'm telling you, this bullshit, right? Almost all of them started getting married and having babies, but that was later, right? When you're in the midst of the revolution, you're trying to overthrow the government, man. It's very important you let me fuck your girlfriend so that you won't have any connections to anything other than the revolution. And that shit comes from Marx. Destroy the family. And that includes all bonding. You stay away from your family, your mother, your father, or whatever. And if you got a wife, nope, can't have none of that stuff. Nothing but the government, nothing but the revolution. And a lot of people were disillusioned by that. They probably felt worse about that kind of stuff than they did about blowing up buildings and shit. That stuff stayed with them when their girlfriends was getting banged by other dudes. It's humorous, but it's true. They're human beings at the end of the day. And it's crazy that they were running these communes where everybody belonged to everybody. So you could just lay up with anybody. It includes the guys laying up with the guys. It includes the girls laying up with the girls. You think they didn't cause problems if a guy started to actually like this girl? Yeah. How can the revolution live on without offspring? Well, their bourgeoisie values kicked in eventually, and almost all of them got married and had babies. So, and no, of course, the pussy distribution was never equal. It never is. It never is. It never is. And then when some of the girls was using sex to manipulate the guys, which is almost always the case, you know, why should she have sex with you? You're not a real man. You're not about the revolution. And I'm telling you, that's the reason why so many of these people ended up leaving. They started having these ideological disagreements, but that shit don't matter. What the real problem was the social problems. The white guys who couldn't have any control because they were white. The white guys who girlfriends were banging the black inmate that she was representing in for a legal case, or she was banging some of the other white dudes that was in the group because you don't own me, bro, and all this kind of shit. I mean, it's just there's tons of stories like that. Yeah, I think that book did a really good job of debunking or demystifying a lot of these people. That they're just normal people with the same likes and dislikes. They're just crazy about being socialists and communists and stuff. They're just crazy people. But they believe a lot of the same garbage that so many other people believe. And that smash monogamy program was crazy. And you see this kind of stuff spill out all over the place. The political lesbianism, the scum, the society for cutting up men. All this stuff is centered around sex and social life. The radical feminists that don't want you to have male friends, they don't want you to have sex with men. You don't got to be a lesbian, but you got to stop having sex with men. Or you need to stop having sex with men who are not members of your revolutionary group or whatever. The control of sex is very important in socialism and socialist systems. Who gets to have sex? How much of it? With who? Because almost all the cults, that's the first thing they do is control your sex life. Jim Jones used to tell people they couldn't have sex in the church, but he was fucking. He was fucking the men and the women, but other people couldn't have sex in the church. He was having kids outside of his marriage, but other people couldn't have sex in the church. That's how you know you. And almost all of these communes ran like cults because there was almost always a leader. BEP says at least now that the testosterone levels have plummeted, these mutants are stuck fighting the man on Twitch. Yeah, there's a bunch of Hassan Pikers. They get to be they get to be computer communists. He could talk all that communist shit. If it was the 70s, they would never have allowed him to amass that kind of money. Somebody would have taken it from him. They'd have said he was disgusting, a capitalist pig. He got robbed. they'd have tried to. They'd have hit him up every week for money, because that's what they did when people came for money. They would hit you up for money all the time. They were forcing especially the rich white girls, and were almost always rich white girls. If you're like the Linda, I'm reading right now. The section I'm reading is about Linda Coleman. Her mother used to own the New York Mets, the baseball team, the New York Mets. Her revolutionary group was living off of her trust fund, which was $150,000. She was paying for everything. They were hitting her up for money all the time because that's what cults do. Liquidate everything, give us the money. Jim Jones was doing the same thing, telling people to sell their houses and then taking the money from them. The that one cult, I think Netflix just did a documentary on them. They used to do the same thing. Give us control of your bank accounts. And that's part of it because you got to control whatever keeps people independent. Can't have that. Can't have any independence. Hassan Piker would have got picked alive back in the day. And the crazy thing is, and it used to be so funny. This is when I actually started getting. No, Nexium was different. That's when the guy was branding the women and shit. That wasn't that. It was something. Heaven, was it Heaven's Gate? I think I forget what it was called. Anyway, what was I about to say? Oh yeah. So the weatherman, they used to look up to the Black Panther Party. They used to love the Black Panthers. They even found themselves a little headquarters that was near the Black Panther headquarters in Chicago. And they used to print their newspapers. Like, everybody had their own little newspaper printing or whatever. And the Black Panthers found out that Weatherman had better printers, better paper, more money, more researchers. They all rich white Jews. They had better everything. They used to just go and rob them and take their shit. They're supposed to be allies. The Black Panthers would just go rob them and take their shit. They would go and occupy their printing press and say, print our newspaper. And they're supposed to be allies. You were allies with them, were you? Were you allies when they kicked the door in, stole your printing press? Were you allies when they were smacking your hose around? Because that's exactly what's happening. And that's why I said, like, I had so much hatred for these disgusting white leftists. And you see some of them, they do it today. They're deferential to thug blacks. They put them on a pedestal. They worship them. You can never be a true revolutionary if you're not even a man first. You can't stand up for yourself. How are you going to stand up for the revolution? What kind of revolution are you going to have when you can't even stand up for yourself? When you letting other people beat up your women and steal your stuff that you probably stole, or at least you use your mama's credit card or whatever to get, and somebody come and take it from you. That's crazy. These people are nuts. All these people are crazy as hell. All right, let's wrap this thing up, y'all. I appreciate everybody who stopped by. Thank you guys for your time, and I'll talk to you guys later.